Happy Monday. It's kind of like in that playlist. That was a new one. Thank you, Druid. So, there is a content warning today, and it is simply because I will be reading the placards from this exhibit, and you can't talk about Freud without talking about penis envy and all of the weird stuff that Freud was into. So I don't want to get censored. I kind of doubt I would have gotten censored anyway, but just in case. So if you are not one of my regular friends, just be aware. Trigger warning if you don't like to discussions about penis envy. There's nothing lewd, nothing overtly sexual. In fact, most of the fashions in here are really, really stunning. Either very pretty or very interesting. So I just want to let you guys know about that. There will be no pornography, okay? So we've got lots to look at. So, and we are on our last official chapter of Mavis Fitzrandolph's book. There is more in the appendix that we are going to read. There's the story of Old Joe the Quilter. So I'm positive we'll be able to finish, unless I go long, we'll be able to finish that last chapter, chapter 8. But it be later on that we'll finish the appendix. So before I get started, I wanted to tell you about two interesting things from the weekend. One is miniatures and the other one is a podcast. So you guys know how I spend my weekends. I did get a lot of sewing done. I'm pretty proud of myself. I finished one thing that will now go to its next stage. And I am almost done with a block that is going away. I got invited to contribute a block to a quilt that I think, I need to read the info again, but I think it may be shown summer 2026. And possibly at the International Quilt Museum, I'm not sure. But needless to say, I will be in a quilt with some heavyweights. So it's kind of cool. I'm excited about that. So I will show you that as soon as it goes in the mail. Probably by Thursday I'll be able to show you a picture of it. So, and then the other thing, man, Miniverse. You guys know I'm absolutely obsessed with Miniverse. They keep coming out with cute stuff. They are been rapid firing their little collections. They have two holiday collections. One is just Miniverse, and the other one is Target and Miniverse. The Target ones are just as cute as the Miniverse ones, but I have to show you what I got this weekend to build, and I'm not finished with it, but I've got the gist of it. So let me use my tweezers, so my big thumbs. Look at this. It is a little birch deer. And I'm not finished. I need to put the flocking, the flocking powder on him. I think it's just white sand with a little glitter in it, but isn't he cute? And I mean, they are so, and there's a little baby one. They are so very realistic looking. You peg all the little parts together. You have to glue on his antlers, and his nose is like a cranberry, I guess, and his tail is a pine cone. Just the cutest thing. Yeah. So the quilt shop is still being created. Hopefully we'll be ready for Christmas. Wanted to have a little Black Friday sale of some holiday fabrics, so we just haven't gotten around to that yet. So the other thing is a podcast I listen to called Shell Game. And if you guys are into podcasts, I highly recommend this one. It is about AI, but it is so interesting. This journalist named Evan Ratliff basically created a clone of himself. He created multiple clones of himself. And he is using kind of the newer obsession in generative AI, which is agentic AI. The first season of Shell Game was about him creating these clones. The second season just started. I think there's just one episode out, and it's about he built a company where he's the only human. So he's got like literally CFO, CEO are agents, AI agents, and the people doing the work are AI agents. And it's just really interesting because in the very first episode, there's craziness. But there's some really funny things that happened in the first season. And they're fairly short. I think they're like 45 minutes tops each episode, and they're just really interesting. So it doesn't seem like it's very long. I was listening while I was cooking dinner and doing some housework and stuff. So easy listen and funny. So if you're at all interested in just what's up with AI, what are people doing with it, and yeah, like a podcast, highly recommend. So it's called Shell Game, Evan Ratliff. I listen on Spotify. I'm happy to send anybody a link if you're super interested, but if you just search Shell Game podcast, you'll find it. So without further ado, let us look at what I am very excited about, which is this exhibit at FIT. So, as you know, I went to New York not long ago and caught some fun quilty stuff. But one of the things that we were able to do was to go to FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, well-known fashion design school, and look at their exhibit. And it was a free exhibit. Lots of the exhibits, well, I don't want to say lots, but some exhibits in New York are not free. If you go to the Met, you got to pay them a lot of money. I think the admission to the Met right now is like $30. So in trying to be economical, I pushed to go see this exhibit instead. And I'm glad I did. Not that I wouldn't have loved something at the Met, but this was just so fascinating. And now I don't know that it was as fascinating to the other people I was with. Jill was one of them. She liked the clothing in this that was older, the vintage and antique clothing. The modern fashion she's just not into. I like the modern fashion stuff, not necessarily from the runway and fashion, but from the art perspective. So that's why I just absolutely loved it. So without further ado, let us look at this. And I'm going to read you all of the placards, and there's quite a few of them, just because they're like, they're so interesting. So, and I'll move the chat if I need to. So the exhibit is called Dress, Dreams, and Desire, Fashion and Psychoanalysis. And you will be surprised at the connections they made. I think this was a really, really splendidly done exhibit. Looking at their space, their exhibit space, it's a little bit of a scrappy curatorship, because you can see like some of their mannequins are not the same. And, so things are a little scrappy, but it was just such a well curated exhibit. And I think all of like the really, very pithy statements about each sort of section. So this is what you see when you first walk into FIT. Best as I can tell, I think FIT kind of takes up like a city block. And this is kind of on one corner where you go in. And I don't know. It's almost like a big lobby. I don't know what else is in there. Maybe, I don't know if it's classrooms or school administration or who knows what. But anyway, so this is what you see when you first walk in. And the exhibit is actually downstairs. And I'm kind of like, oh, this is going to be some little, scrawny little exhibit, in a darkened room. It was an exhibit in a darkened room, but it was not scrawny. It was, like, again, very, very exciting exhibit. So you're going down the stairs and you see this. And then we enter the space. Now, of course, it's very dark in there, but I think my photos are kind of okay. So I'm going to start reading some of this to you, and I'll put this up because there's this interesting picture here. This picture is by Gustave Moreau, Oedipus and the Sphinx, 1864, from the Met. So this is according to the Greek story. Oedipus correctly answered the riddle of the Sphinx, thereby saving the people of Thebes. Freud liked to think of himself as being like Oedipus, solving the mystery of the human mind. He was nothing if not, humble, right? So let me, so let me start. This is Dr. Valerie Steele. I think I'm not clear if she's the curator or kind of how they curate things there, but she did write a book that, like, the book that goes with this. And I didn't buy the book. I don't even know how much it was. I honestly don't know where you would have bought it from. I'm sure there's like a gift shop or something there, but like it wasn't immediately apparent. So anyway, so this is what she has to say. Dress, dreams, and desire. Fashion and psychoanalysis. We all speak Freud, whether we know it or not, wrote historian Peter Gay. Certainly, fashion people speak Freud. Marc Jacobs designed a Freudian slip dress. John Galliano created a couture collection for Christian Dior titled Freud or Fetish. Prada presented a fashion film in which Helena Bonham Carter plays the patient who takes off her fur coat, lies down on the couch, and begins to talk about her daddy. Her voice fades, and the psychoanalyst, played by Ben Kingsley, stands up, walks over to the fur coat, and begins stroking it. As he surreptitiously slips the coat onto his body and gazes at his reflection in the mirror, we suddenly hear her ask, "What does it all mean?" Psychoanalysis is famously concerned with the search for hidden meanings, but the key word here is search, since meaning is not self-evident or unchanging. Dress, Dreams, and Desire is the first exhibition to explore the cultural history of fashion and psychoanalysis. It is also the first to interpret fashion through the lens of key psychoanalytic ideas about the body, sexuality, and the unconscious. By placing Sigmund Freud, Jacques Lacan, and other psychoanalysts in their historical context, the exhibit illuminates a shifting landscape of ideas. For all its false starts and dead ends, psychoanalysis provides important clues about the power and allure of fashion, as well as the ambivalence and hostility that fashion also attracts. It's very interesting. Fashion is often dismissed as superficial, and it is literally superficial, since it exists primarily on the surface of the body. But fashion is meaningful and important precisely because of its intimate connection with the fleshly human body, which is the foundation of the individual's evolving sense of self. Freud's insight into the development of the self as an embodied subjectivity has been confirmed by neuroscience, as has his emphasis on the influence of emotion on thought. Perhaps we might best characterize fashion as a deep surface, a changeable, renewable second skin, where unconscious emotions and fantasies take symbolic form. So that's a statement by Dr. Valerie Steele. Okay, so then the statement above this picture is called Freud and Fashion. Sigmund Freud, 1856 to 1939, seldom mentioned clothing or fashion in his published work. But in letters to his fiancée, Martha Bernays, he expressed powerful emotions about shopping. "I shudder at the thought of my tailor's bill." Let's move forward. So there's a picture of good old Freud. I think this might be a younger picture of him. Let's see. It doesn't say 1906, maybe? Yeah, Freud 1906. So this is a little bit like you need to put the glasses, the little round glasses, and the cigar, and then he looks like the Freud you know. So it goes on to say English style tailored suits like this one, which I think is actually not this, but there's a picture of a tuxedo, which we'll see in a second, were markers of assimilation and modernization for Jewish men in turn-of-the-century Vienna. And throughout his life, Freud placed great importance on appropriate attire. As his son Martin wrote, his clothing, rigidly conventional, was cut from the best materials and tailored to perfection. Although Freud never analyzed his own style of dress or his feelings about shopping, his theories laid the foundation for later generations of psychoanalysts to study the unconscious significance of dress and shopping. In 1885, Freud received a fellowship to study in Paris, the international capital of the new psychology, where doctors had begun to study hysteria, hypnosis, and the sexual perversions. Paris was also the capital of women's fashion, and in a letter to his fiancée's sister, Freud compared the city to a vast, overdressed sphinx who gobbles up every foreigner unable to answer her questions. What did he mean that the Sphinx was overdressed? Was he anxious about covering her nakedness, or afraid that the Parisian fashions were too much? European men at the turn of the century often described women as mysterious sphinxes. It's interesting because, Egyptology was like really big at the turn of the century. And this was even before they opened King Tut's tomb in the 20s. Uh, Unfortunately, Freud shared much of the misogyny of his era, which I think we're going to see a lot of. And it warped his ideas about the relationship women had with fashion. And so said his clothing, originally conventional, was cut from the best materials and tailored to perfection. So, see, he's a natty dresser. Um, so the suit that we'll see in a second, this is it's a cutaway, like a tuxedo of the time. Freud did not wear this particular suit, but he did patronize tailors like Nyes, whose English style suits were markers of assimilation for Jewish men. Psychologists who study shopping have been influenced by Freud's colleague Melanie Klein, 1882 to 1960, I think, who suggested that the consumption of goods refers back to the fantasy of incorporating the good breast. If we are stressed or anxious, we may eat or drink too much to try to fill psychic hunger by buying things. Oh my goodness, that says a lot. That says a lot about me, right? Nyes, men's suit, Vienna, circa 1905. So this is the suit that we're talking about. Very, very natty looking tuxedo of the time period, turn of the century. It's the cutaway. See, we read that. So this dress, oh my gosh, look at this. Is this not the most beautiful thing? Let's see, I will leave this up so you can look at all of this beading while we read about this. So this is by Emile Pasquier, Evening Dress, 1889 to 1890. Paris was the international capital of new psychology, as well as the capital of women's fashion. Medical and legal experts there studied issues such as sexual fetishism and kleptomania, which often involved fashion. Well, yeah, I guess if people want some nice clothing and they don't have the money for it, they'll steal it, right? Because fashion trends were often launched by courtesans and actresses, many people worried that contemporary fashion was too erotic or extreme. I mean, I don't think there's anything erotic or extreme about this, at least, from today's, vision, but it's just, I mean, I just found this to be like stunning. I mean, look at this. Got this like beaded fringe, all kinds of like, so this time period, see 1889, this is like the, I think it's the second new era, what they called it. It's got that S-bend corset. So this is kind of the corset that you hear of in tight lacing. This is where they were trying to get those teeny waists. And this would be the fashionable people getting the teeny waist. Your average women, middle-class women, were not wearing things like this, not cinching into corsets. It's kind of just like today, average women are kind of not interested in the pain of fashion. Whereas we have influencers and et cetera, who will kind of fall in line with this. But from a fabric standpoint, like this thing is beautiful. It's like brown silk. This here is like a velvet burnout. This I've kind of always thought of as being more of a modern textile treatment, but apparently they had it back then, turn of the century, and these big puffy sleeves. Oh, just stunning. These little pearls. I would assume that these are like glass beads with like a pearlescent coating, but it didn't say, so. Oops. I thought I had another one, but see, I'll leave that there while I read the next thing. This is funny. I'll bring this up. So look at this picture. So you see it's like a courtroom or something. Actually, not a courtroom. I think it's a hospital room. You see there's like a cot here and this woman who's like kind of fallen out. Andre Brulé, a clinical lesson at the Salpêtrière, which I think is a hospital maybe. 1887, Freud studied with the famous Parisian neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot, who is depicted here with one of his hypnotized patients. Freud had a print of this painting in his office. Like, why would you want this in your office? And his little daughter Anna once asked, "What was wrong with the lady in the picture?" Freud replied, "Her corset is too tight." Such a misogynist. Okay. So now we'll move on to the next thing. And look at this. Talk about what that is in a minute. So the naked dreamer is the first section. In The Interpretation of Dreams, which he wrote in 1900, Freud argued that dreams are about forbidden wishes, usually sexual wishes. Of course, Freud. Nothing can ever be like, just run-of-the-mill thoughts. So sexual wishes that have been partially expressed. Among the typical dreams he cited were embarrassing dreams of being naked. But why should nakedness be embarrassing? As Freud observed, little children have to be taught not to show off their naked bodies. It is true that the naked human being has often been associated with shame, while clothing has been justified on the grounds of modesty. As an educated Jew, Freud knew the biblical story of Adam and Eve. Psychoanalysts today remain very interested in both shame and the gaze, although they usually regard modesty as a reaction to desire. Most animals have a coat of fur, feathers, or scales, but only humans wear clothes. One theory holds that people require the physical protection of a second skin. Yet different cultures and eras have different ideas about what constitutes nakedness and what counts as dress. Even when they do not wear clothes, humans have always fashioned their bodies, with tattoos, for example. We tend to think of psychoanalysis as a theory of the mind, but Freud rejected mind-body dualism. His innovation was to explore the unconscious significance of nakedness and dress. And so what you have here is a monkey fur suit from 1971. I don't like to think about what poor monkey this came from. I suspect it's multiple monkeys, and it's probably those smaller, like I don't know, gibbons or bonobos, like those monkeys that kind of travel in packs. I don't think we're talking about like, a chimpanzee from the Howdy Doody Show, or a sign language talking gorilla. Let's hope. This is 1971 though, so one never knows. This was made by Revillon. It's Revillon. So yeah, this is among existing primate species, only Homo sapiens, the naked ape, has lost its coat of fur. There are many theories about why this happened, but Charles Darwin suggested that humans' relatively naked skin might have evolved as a means of sexual selection, like the peacock's tail. Naked skin also provides a canvas for further decoration, from tattoos to luxury fashion. So this is the first display of clothing. And for some reason, these are not coming up in order the way they are supposed to. So over here on the left, we have a Jean-Paul Gaultier tattoo dress from Cyber Baba collection, spring 1996. Whether or not they wear clothes, humans have apparently always modified, augmented, or decorated their bodies in some way, from tattoos and tooth filing to hairstyles and high heels. In the center, we have something from Moschino called Fig Leaf Swim Trunks from 1989. According to the biblical story of Adam and Eve, after they ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge and saw that they were naked, they were ashamed and tried to hide their bodies, or at least their genitals. Although popularly associated with modesty, the fig leaf also draws attention to what it ostensibly hides. So you put something over it, people are going to go, oh, what's under there? And then this last one, it didn't pop out to me until I looked at my picture later, but you can see this is like a bust, like a carved marble bust that's been printed on the dress. This is by Lanvin, dress summer 2013. We are born naked, but in most cultures, people usually cover their bodies. However, in ancient Greece, nakedness was sometimes idealized as nudity. Young male athletes performed nude publicly, but female nudity was largely restricted to the private sphere and to art. This Lamvan dress features the image of a classical Greek statue of a nude. And then, oops, okay, these were in backwards. So, I thought you might like a close-up of those swim trunks. And best I could tell is it's kind of a quilted thing. Like it's looks like it's like a silver lame leaf and it's been quilted to give like the veins of the leaf and then just sewed on the front of the pants. All right, I'll leave that one up for you for a second. All right. See, the next placard is called The Libido for Looking. The libido for looking and touching is an important part of the sexual drive, argued Freud. Observing how men actively looked at women, he suggested that the concealment of the female body keeps sexual curiosity awake. The desire to look and be looked at does play a central role in the erotic relationship between body and dress. But Freud interpreted women's psychosexuality different than men's. Of course he did. In women, the inclination to passive exhibitionism is almost invariably buried under the imposing reactive function of sexual modesty, but not without a loophole being left for it in relation to clothes. In The Psychology of Clothes, 1930, the British psychoanalyst John Carl Flugel argued that both men and women have to compromise between the desire to exhibit their bodies and the partial repression of that desire. Whereas in 1905, Freud had noticed variability in the degree of women's exhibitionism. By 1930, Flugel emphasized that women's legs have emerged. I mean, you think about it, 1930, well, 1920s, you got skirts going shorter. Here in the States, skirts got longer in the 30s, but then emphasis shifted from the legs to the back. Now, this is something in the 30s, you get those low-cut back dresses, wrote curator James Lavere, whose theory of the shifting erogenous zone has misled generations of fashion writers. Not only did he incorrectly claim that changes in women's fashion are caused by men's shifting sexual interest in different parts of the female body, he also ignored Flugel's attention to historic changes in men's attire. So these are the three dresses we'll talk about next. So obviously this beautiful one is, I think, pretty much the same era as that first brown one. It's actually a little bit earlier. So this one is by Maison Roger dress, circa 1877. It's a little bit earlier than that first brown one. So the one on the left. For centuries, Western women's dress tended to conceal most of the body, although it often emphasized the body's curves. So this is, again, that time period where you're getting these corsets that have these really, these strong curves. And these were not curves that really, before the mid to late 19th century that women were concerned with. Because before that, you had like this very inverted triangle look. Whereas this was far more complicated with like how it curved out into like onto the hips and etc. Yet concealment did not necessarily only indicate shame. As the Austrian novelist Robert Musil observed, for some people in fin de siècle, how to say that, Europe, exhibiting the body would have meant a relapse into the animal state and the renunciation of the civilized sexual stimulus offered by clothes. Fashion was loaded with an erotic charge, concealing at its core the slim white animal that made itself fearfully desirable, letting itself be searched for. Gads. Okay, the one in the center by Calotte-Sours, Evening Chemise Dress, circa 1924. This is very, very traditionally 1920s looking dress. The fashionable exposure of women's legs began when the war crinoline of 1915 raised hemlines to mid-calf. By 1925, hemlines were almost at the knee. Skirts began to become longer in 1927. Hemlines rose dramatically again only in the 1960s, which, like the 1920s, was an era dominated by youth. Very interesting, right? You got I guess, what the 20s is when the silent generation is either being born or kind of coming up in their youth. The 1960s, baby boomers. You've got these very large generations that are influencing. I guess I would say millennials, the millennial age range is bigger than the Gen X age range. I'm Gen X. We're kind of smashed there in between boomers and millennials, and then the Gen Z, and now they're talking about Generation A, are much larger. And, I mean, they're obviously been influencing fashion for some time. Okay, and then this one on the right, this is an example of that open back. In the mid 1930s, fashion increasingly focused on the back, not because the erogenous zone had shifted. Rather, change resulted from the Hays Code, Hayes, in Hollywood, which limited exposure of actresses' breasts, and the design of women's bathing suits, which exposed the back, permitting tanning, which had become extremely fashionable. So this dress is by Augusta Bernard, evening dress, 1933. Also very lovely. And I love how they have this, like, they chose fashions that kind of all went together visually, even if they were totally different eras. So just all this black, and then you've got these touches of copper. So really brilliant that they found dresses, like a decade apart that had that same kind of look to them. Okay. This dress is also really beautiful. So this one is 1895. So a little bit later than that brown dress, I think. Like, maybe actually, I'm trying to remember the date on the brown dress. It's probably about the same time period. A little bit different sort of fashion and styling. This is actually a little bit simpler. That first brown dress actually had an overlay apron. So it was kind of layers, even if it may not have been like really abundantly obvious because of all the fringe and the beads and stuff, but it actually had like it's called an apron. It's like an overlay. So this is a plainer dress. I think what we've got going on here is this is almost in the robe a la anglaise style of the late 1800s. I'm sorry, the late 1700s. You've got this like slit in the front where you can see this under skirt. So I think that this is kind of like it's an interesting dress. This is by Joseph Johnson, evening dress in pink silk satin, circa 1895. Historically, women's evening dress tended to be more physically revealing than day dress. So they had like the décolletage would be on display, arms would be on display, sometimes shoulders on display. Worn in private or semi-private spaces, dresses with low necklines and bare arms were accepted as aesthetically sublimated eroticism. And then, oops, I guess I didn't get a close-up picture, but in this case, they had these opera spectacles, so like the little tiny binoculars. This says optical magnification devices, such as opera glasses, were used not only to look at actors on the stage, but also to gaze at others in the audience. Bunch of perverts. And so they're referencing what we're going to see next, which is a political cartoon. These opera glasses are 1895 to 1900. So they were pretty. Gold leaf, maybe. I don't know. Okay, this. So this is a very creepy cartoon. But this is what they say about it. So this is Grandville. Jean Ignace Isidore Gerard. Venus at the Opera, 1844. So this is like, 175 years. the male gaze was visualized in images like Grandville's Venus at the Opera long before it was named. Although some women recoiled from intrusive optical attention, the Countess Greffuli, that's spelled Greffulhe, a famous Belle Epoque beauty. She told a friend, "I don't think there is any pleasure in the world comparable to that of a woman who feels that she is being looked at by everybody. I just returned from the opera and was astonished with the transfiguration of the crowd made me undergo. How can one live when one can no longer provoke this great anonymous caress after having known and tasted it?" So, I mean, this is interesting. So you've got, all these creepers looking at this woman, but she actually enjoys it. So, but these eyeballs instead of heads are so creepy. Okay. So this one, I'm going to talk about some of the stuff in here and as well as this as a whole. So this section is called Sexual Symbolism and Fetishism. Freud is probably best known for his sex and dream theories. Everyone who reads The Interpretation of Dreams, 1900, becomes familiar with the idea that long and/or hard objects, such as neckties and high heels, often symbolize the penis, or phallus, an ancient symbol of male potency. So, okay. I have never read The Interpretation of Dreams, by the way. I don't know if any of you have. I don't know if you maybe took psychology in college. Maybe they made you read some of it. Because a top hat is historically a man's item of clothing, and because the crown sticks up, it can be a phallic symbol. Receptacles, such as boxes, purses, and pockets, can symbolize the vagina or uterus. But these ideas do not always apply. When Freud suggested to his young patient Dora that her dream about a jewel box symbolized the female genitals, she told him, "I knew you'd say that." She's like, "Sometimes a jewel box is just a jewel box." The term fetish was first used in the 18th century to refer to the irrational worship of objects believed to possess magic powers. Later, Karl Marx coined the term commodity fetishism to describe the way objects produced by labor acquired an exaggerated exchange value. I mean, we still live with this today. In 1877, the French psychiatrist Alfred Binet brought the concept of fetishism into psychology. Fetishism was redefined as a sexual perversion, primarily associated with men who often fetishized objects of women's clothing or body parts. Freud initially accepted this idea. However, in 1909, he presented a lecture in Vienna in which he argued that, in the world of everyday experience, we can observe that half of humanity must be classed among the clothes fetishists. All women, that is, are clothes fetishists. Speak for yourself, Freud. The lecture was lost for years. Meanwhile, Freud changed his mind about female fetishists, arguing instead that in men's unconscious, the fetish functioned as a substitute for the women's missing penis. All right, so in this case, we have top left-hand corner right here. This is a Brooks Brothers top hat, circa 1890. Next, down here is Christian Dior, a red corseted top hat by Stephen Jones, fall of 2000. And I didn't catch it very well, but you could see there's like it's laced up right here on the side, and there's like little the little ties hang down. And then this down here is a top hat made of tattooed pigskin, Justin Smith, 2007. Now, this first center row, up here at the top, we have an evening bag reticule, 1885 to 1895. here in the middle, and I've got another picture of this, Elsa Schiaparelli, Bouquet of Pansies bag, circa 1938. We're going to hear a lot more about Elsa Schiaparelli, and I was surprised at what they had to say about her. And then here at the bottom, it's a bit hard to see. Like I said, it was dark in here, and lots of people were around this display. By the way, look at that. This tattooed pigskin. It's like a bat. And so this bag right here is Medusa Evening Bag by Versace, 1991. Okay, so then this column with the shoes. Here at the top, Jack Jacobus Ltd. High-heeled boots, 1895 to 1900. And I would say these are probably equivalent to like our today just high-heeled shoes. We're going to see something else in a moment. These here are Chanel shoes with gun heels, Cruise 2009, and you can see there's their little handguns. I can't imagine that these are very comfortable, because what I do know about cord waning and shoemaking is that it's really important where the pressure point of the heel is. So that pressure point being kind of like at the beginning of your arch from the heel can't possibly be comfortable. The weight of your heel really needs a better balance. But who knows? These little guns might provide some kind of cantilevered, who knows? I don't know anything about actual fashion design. These ones at the bottom are interesting. These are by Lanvin, Trompe l'oeil boots, fall 2006. And so you can see they're actual leather boots, then they fake you out by looking like these metal stiletto heels. Okay, now the corsets over here on the right. The top one is a red silk satin corset from 1889. Pretty standard stuff. And then the one here at the bottom is Issey Miyake red plastic body bustier from 1983. I was surprised at how early that was. Issey Miyake, has been making stuff for a while, but it really surprised me that get this up above that this was in the 80s and not more recently. And so here's a better picture of this. It's really, really beautiful. Obviously, this is one that's never been used, never been worn, because you'll see wear on these, these areas when it's a used corset. And then here's the Issey Miyake one. And I don't know what it looks like on the back. It was hard to tell. I kind of assume that it's maybe just got some kind of like lacing on the back. It could like have a belt or a clasp or something. All right, these these are the fetish ones. Wait a minute, I missed a picture here. Here we go. We look at this before. This is the Elsa Schiaparelli bag from the 30s, and like what a cute little bag. I mean, you could see like kind of this ribbony stuff at the bottom. I think is supposed to be the stems, and then if you kind of look in here, you can see it's just like a little bag that kind of has a drawstring, but it's got all of this frou-frou, and these are probably millinery flowers that are sewn on. Pretty cool stuff. Let's see. Okay, I think that was it. Okay. These boots. These boots looked huge. I tried to sort of look and see, based on the length of this. We made a wild guess that these are like a lady size 9, but they looked just enormous. And so what this says, psychiatrists have long observed that men tend to fetishize certain body parts and items of dress. Already by the late 19th century, extreme high-heeled boots and shoes were produced by fetishist clients. And this just says fetish boots circa 1895. So I didn't prepare a picture to see them side by side, but I think you should be able to tell like this curve and this, the height of this heel are definitely higher than these. So it's kind of the difference between, say, like a super high heel that somebody might wear, business dress, to something that's more of like an extreme high heel. All right. Oh, this is just another angle of them. You can see me in the mirror. And this was cool because they did have a mirror in the back, so you could kind of see what the other side of the shoes looked like. I wish they had done that with the big display of those items, so that like you could see the back of the Issey Miyake corset. But alas. Okay. This is fun. Oh, look, more high-heeled shoes. So what we are looking here now, psychoanalysis and surrealism. Salvador Dali described the interpretation of dreams as one of the capital discoveries of his life. But whereas Freud wanted to use reason to interpret the unconscious, the surrealist plunged into dreams, embracing the idea of a self that was haunted by otherness. At the International Surrealist Exhibition of 1936, Dali appeared wearing a diving suit. A diving suit to symbolize his immersion in the unconscious. Dali was acquainted with the French psychiatrist Jacques Lacan, who went on to create a revolutionary new school of psychoanalysis. In 1936, Dali began collaborating with Elsa Schiaparelli, thus bringing psychoanalytic ideas into fashion. It is not clear whether Dali ever introduced Lacan to Schiaparelli, but Lacan ultimately moved the relationship between fashion and psychoanalyst beyond Freudian dream work, sexual symbolism, and exhibitionism to new ideas about body image, fragmentation, aggression, and the gaze. Really pithy stuff here. Okay. This is a painted paper tie made by Dali. And there are 3 of them. So let's see. Okay, I think I have a better picture of this one. So there's the arms. Yeah, here's the picture, the full-size picture. So it's a painted necktie design. I don't know if it was meant to eventually become a necktie, like it was a spec piece he did. I'm not sure. So this one is of boots. The second one is painted necktie design of ladies' hands and jewelry. So it's really the diamond rings. And then the third one is a painted necktie design of ballerinas dancing. So let's back up. I think I liked this one the best. And this was painted in 1959, I think. Yeah, and you can see his signature there. Yeah, the blingy rings and the bracelets. I just really like this one. I thought that was cool. And then here's the ballerinas. But, not just like normal ballerinas. We've got some weird stuff with keyholes in, in buildings and stuff. Good old Dali. Now, look at these 2. Just when you think they're just connecting imagery with the concept, this will blow your mind. So this first dress on the left-hand side, the butterflies on this dressing gown are a symbol of the psyche or soul. Schiaparelli helped bring psychoanalytic ideas into fashion. Visitors will see other examples of her work and learn about Lacan's mirror stage in the next gallery. So that's like a whole nother thing we'll look at on Thursday. So Elsa Schiaparelli, dressing gown, summer of 1938. Now this one here on the right-hand side. So this is by Adrian. Evening dress, 1947. Salvador Dali frequently produced surreal images for fashion magazines and manufacturers. For example, he designed the print on the textile used for this dress by Adrian. Dali also created the necktie designs on display nearby, which are replete with sexual symbolism. So good old Dali. But I mean, look at this is very Dali-esque. You've got these like weird rocks with all kinds of symbols and junk on them. They're kind of all slumping and doing weird things. And then the idea of the butterflies. And these were not just things that were brought into this exhibit. These are things like these people were literally working within these concepts. So Elsa Schiaparelli was she was doing this like knowledgeably, not just like, let me put some butterflies on an evening gown or a coat. And then this other Adrienne literally worked with Dali to make the fabric. So like, what? That just blew my mind. So this was a film running, but I wanted to show it simply because Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound, that's what this is. It's a clip from that movie. 1945, stars Gregory Peck as a man with amnesia who was treated by a psychoanalyst played by Ingrid Bergman. The film features a dream sequence with set design by Salvador Dali. So, like, what? You know, and I'm fairly certain I've seen this one. I have a greater memory of seeing the what's the one, why am I blanking on his name? Let's see, the one where Rear Window. I think that's the one that I always remember having seen, because I think I saw it like around Christmas or something. So Druid has some details. I don't think the Simiaki corset has a back. I think it's just a rigid breastplate, kind of a snap-on deal. Okay. Yes, it did kind of look like it curved a little bit towards the back. So yeah, that might just be like a tension that it fits around the waist. But there's another one that we'll see probably not until Thursday, where it's the same kind of thing, like a breastplate, but it ties on. So, but it was really interesting to me. I am constantly finding things that Dali was involved in that are so surprising to me, that you just, you know, I studied Salvador Dali both in high school and in college. And, oh yeah, Jared, I did see that you were sending me stuff. So Instagram, you can see the back in the images. Yeah, I'll try to pull those up in a minute. So yeah, and like, did you know, so there's lollipops that I think they have the gum in them. I think the Chupa Chups. You familiar with these? Salvador Dali just designed the packaging for Chupa Chups. Like, what? He was all over the place, and, you know, just doing what he did. Okay. So now this is like, oh, nice 1950s fashion. So this one is called Bitter Enemies. During the era of the Cold War, especially in the United States, the profession of psychoanalysis turned away from radical ideas about sexual freedom toward an emphasis on sexual and gender conformity. In Fashion and the Unconscious, 1953, Edmund Bergler attacked the homosexual czars of fashion creation, arguing that women were being dressed by their bitterest enemies. Many of the world's most famous fashion designers were gay men, but their clients would not have agreed that they hated women and created dress absurdities. Yet psychoanalysts like Bergler clearly hated their gay clients. And their authority reinforced social prejudice. In 1971, Richard Nixon was caught on tape saying, "You know, one of the reasons fashions have made women look so terrible is because the goddamn designers hate women." Screw you, Nixon. Psychoanalysts have viciously attacked homosexuals, also expressed hostility towards women, especially feminists, lesbians, career women, frigid wives, and bad mothers. In her book, Wife Dressing, 1959, the designer Anne Fogarty warned how a young patient described her mother as a dust mop. Women are criticized for their obsession with fashion, lack of interest in fashion, or bad taste. So, like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you're interested in fashion and you look good, well, then, you know, you're one kind of bad woman. And if you have no interest in fashion or bad taste, you're another kind of woman. And none of them are good. So, again, screw all these people. Notably, Bergler never once recognized that women might find pleasure in fashion. Both gay and straight men also experienced social pressure to conform to normative sex and gender standards. Cold War paranoia is evident in a 1950s advertisement. Dress right. You can't afford not to. So, and then we have these outfits. So on the left, this is Anne Fogarty, green cocktail dress, circa 1954. I mean, this is like right off the screen of Leave It to Beaver, right? Female designers also often echoed conventional ideas, as when Anne Fogarty urged women to dress like a wife. All right, Anne Fogarty. In the center, we have your standard men's suit. Doesn't look a whole lot different than what they still wear today. In a heteronormative society that had become increasingly hostile to homosexuals, gay male designers usually tried to conform to normative dress codes. And this is a McCord and Mace suit, men's gray wool suit, 1956. Druid said Nixon may have had a point there. Okay, Druid. And then this brown dress on the right. This post-war era has been described as the golden age of the haute couture, when predominantly male couturiers, such as Christian Dior, created women's fashions characterized by a spectacular femininity. So this is a Christian Dior brown cocktail dress, fall-winter 1955. And I mean, Dior kind of, I think, exemplifies the mid to late 1950s fashion, like, you know, the quote unquote wasp waist, the full skirt, either like lovely sort of off the shoulder kind of thing, or sleeveless, you know, that princess dress, like, you know it when you see it. That's all Dior. Okay, next, this was something interesting. There were comic books called Psychoanalysis. Like, what? So these are comic books called Psychoanalysis from 1955. I would really be curious to know, like, what in the hell is happening in these? People searching for peace of mind through psychoanalysis. Like, I mean, is this just cartoons of people getting therapy? I don't know. It's interesting. These characters, let's see. Freddie Carter, Ellen Lyman, and Mark Stone. Introducing a new direction in magazines, an entirely novel and unique kind of reading experience. I'm guessing perhaps there was some, I don't know, 10 cents. Spend 10 cents on this. Also, what's interesting is, so of all of the placards would have either they're in FIT's collection or they were lent by people. This one was lent by Anonymous. So they either didn't want to have anything to do with this exhibit and didn't want their name on it, or they were like, I don't need people knowing that I have these comic books. Okay, so we're getting towards kind of the end of the section that I'm going to stop in today. Lost my place. Okay. So post-50s, toward a liberated psychoanalysis. Not all psychoanalysts were dedicated to the normalization of individuals at odds with the existing society. There had always been a minority of leftists aligned with psychoanalysis, and their influence began to grow. Franz Fanon, 1925 to 1961, author of Black Skin, White Masks, argued that only a psychoanalytic interpretation could explain the unconscious mechanisms of racism and colonialism. Born in Martinique, Fanon explored how the projective fantasies of white racists alienated and traumatized blacks and colonial subjects. Racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny, and homophobia are among the most ubiquitous types of group hatred. They have shared features, but also historical differences. The greater part of the feminist movement has identified Freud as the enemy, wrote Juliet Mitchell in Psychoanalysis and Feminism in 1974. Yet she argued that the rejection of psychoanalysis is fatal for feminism. The members of the French women's liberation group, Psychoanalyse et Politique, for example, studied Lacanian psychoanalysis while also critiquing its phallocentrism. Hélène Cixous wrote about Sonia Rykiel's fashions, arguing that they were not mirror clothes that both attract and repel the gaze. Sonia's clothes touch the body, they never attack it. John Ursel Fryer, 1938 to 2003, was smuggled into the 1972 annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association. Disguised in a Nixon mask and speaking through a voice distortion microphone, he announced to the audience, "I am a homosexual. I am a psychiatrist." The following year, the APA announced that homosexuality was not a mental illness. It never was, of course. Today, the emancipatory potential for psychoanalysis is increasingly focused on analyzing hatred and prejudice. Very interesting stuff. Oh, Druid has something interesting here. Right, Robin? What was in those comic books? So hold on a second. I'll look at that link that Druid shared. So let me we'll jump forward to this so you can see these and let us. Ooh, a blog with some of the content. Okay. Let me open this. Okay, so Freud quotes blogspot.com. Strange psychoanalysis comics from the 1950s. Oh my goodness. It's literally like, can we look in this in detail? It's kind of difficult for me to see. So this is literally like actual psychoanalysis. This is so bizarre. It's the conversations between these people and their analysts. Oh my goodness. Okay. I will have to look at this more later. Druid has provided the link. So we'll have to read that for poops and giggles later. All right, so these three garments, the one on the left is by Madame Willie Posey, a top and pants set circa 1970. Like many black artists and designers, the Harlem couturier, Madame Willie Posey responded to the liberation struggles of the 1960s. This ensemble emphasizes her connection with the African diaspora. Posey was the mother. You guys know who her daughter is or was? She recently died. Willie Posey is Faith Ringgold's mother. So quilter Faith Ringgold, we unfortunately lost her. Was it earlier this year or last year? I can't remember. But yeah, Faith Ringgold's mother. And she's the grandmother of the black feminist scholar Michelle Wallace. So we've got a tiny little quilt connection here. All right, so the ensemble in the middle, this is by Sonia Rykiel, sweater with coordinating pants. I would wear that. Circa 1975. A member of the women's liberation movement in France, Hélène Cixous, and that is spelled Cixous. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing it correctly, wrote that Sonia Rykiel's clothes were not mirror clothes that attract and repel. Instead, wearing Rykiel's clothes was like going into the water, which envelops me and without effacing me, hides me transparently. And here I am, dressed in the closest point to myself, almost in myself. And then here on the right, which we already looked at a little bit, This is Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren, a bondage ensemble from 1977. So this is your punk rock kind of stuff in fashion. If Reichel's clothes were gentle, Westwood's clothes were fierce. The anarchic sensibility of the punk movement is evident in this garment, which draws on Westwood's research into fetish clothes, uniforms, and straitjackets. I mean, it's of all of the quote-unquote fetish clothing that Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren put together and styled and created, this one looks like it's probably the most comfortable. A lot of Vivienne Westwood's stuff had those like weird chains and junk. So they were difficult to walk. Okay, yeah. So Robin and Druid have confirmed Faith Ringgold died last year, and she was born Faith Willie Jones. So she was named after her mother, I guess, her middle name. I didn't even realize, like, I did read the placards just like to see who made everything, but I did not catch the Faith Ringgold connection there. I had no idea her mother was a fashion designer. So very cool. Oh, and here's a close up of, so you can see, like, it's really an interesting print on this dress. So you got the zebra kind of within the foliage, and then you have, oh, here it is, the leopard in there. It's pretty cool. Okay. So we're coming into the end here. What we're going to look at today. So the masquerade. I think this might be misplaced a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. So the masquerade. Freud's theory of the mind emphasized an expanded vision of human sexuality that went beyond reproduction to encompass many types of pleasure seeking. By the 1920s, as his work was translated into other languages, psychoanalysis became increasingly associated with personal and sexual freedom for young women and sexual minorities. Even before World War I, women like Gabrielle Coco Chanel had pioneered a chic and androgynous dandyism. By the 1920s, many women adopted boyish and body-revealing styles. They abandoned corsets and cut their hair. Men's styles changed less, but LGBTQ plus individuals were much more visible in big cities. So I think this is the correct placard for this one. A freer and more tolerant world is being invented. Inverts are alluring. Lesbians are imposing boy style, and transvestites have the rights of citizens, wrote Robert McAlmon, an American expatriate in Paris. According to British psychoanalyst J.C. Flugel, modern women's fashion was a sign of their victory over sexual repression and social subordination. Yet his colleague, Joan Riviere, described how professional women often felt the need defensively to perform femininity in dress and behavior in her article, The Masquerade of Womanliness, 1929. And she even argued that there was no difference between genuine womanliness and the masquerade. So these outfits, these costumes, on the left, you would probably never guess. Well, you might guess because of the way the lines of this dress. It's kind of got like a dropped waist here. But this is something like I would kind of maybe wear today if it looked okay on me. You know, in fact, I kind of have some dresses like this from, you know, like the 20 teens. But this dress is by Augusta Bernard, Day Dress, 1929. In her famous article, The Masquerade of Womanliness, 1929, the English psychoanalyst Joan Riviere described how professional women often felt the need defensively to perform femininity in dress and demeanor. She argued that there was no difference between genuine womanliness and the masquerade, an idea that would later inspire both Jacques Lacan and Judith Butler. Here in the middle, here, this blue ensemble. Gabrielle Coco Chanel pioneered a chic and androgynous dandyism, which influenced the image of the modern woman. Speaking of herself in the third person, this one is interesting. Speaking of herself in the third person, Chanel told Salvador Dali she took the English masculine and made it feminine. Chanel always dressed like the strong, independent male she had dreamed of being. Now, can you imagine not only telling that to Salvador Dali, but you're talking about yourself in the third person? Like, you can't make some of this up. So this is 1935 wool dress by Coco Chanel. But it's not really a dress. It's a skirt and jacket. So they kind of misrepresented that. So this man's dressing gown, which is the next one, by Charvet. Freud argued that homosexuality was simply a variant of the sexual drive, and that it was as impossible to cure homosexuality as it would be to cure heterosexuality. The openly gay Mexican poet Salvador Novo drew on his readings of Freud to think through his sexual identity and attraction to chauffeurs. For his 1924 portrait, he chose to be depicted in a taxi wearing a dressing gown rather than a tuxedo or smoking jacket. Not only because dressing gowns were associated with the private realm, but also because they were coded as homoerotic. You never knew that dressing gowns were homoerotic. And then this, if I can move this over enough to see it, I don't have to move this dress in. So this is Lucien Lelong, wool jersey suit, 1927. Many women are drawn to psychoanalysis in the 20s because it represented the emancipation of sexuality from reproduction. The styles of the 20s also emphasized a youthful, androgynous body. This tendency gradually changed over the interwar years, as many designers increasingly drew attention to women's sexually dimorphic curves. So, we're getting to the last one here. So this, interestingly, we don't have a suit that Freud wore, but we have a suit that belongs to his great-granddaughter. So Bella Freud, this was lent by her to the museum. And Bella, I think I read, she's in her early 60s. I think I saw she's like 64 or so. My clothes are very influenced by the clothes worn by men like David Bowie, says fashion designer Bella Freud, the great-granddaughter of Sigmund Freud. I'm interested in the way a girl looks boyish. Her podcast, Fashion Neurosis with Bella Freud, has been widely acclaimed. So this is literally 2025 Bella Freud's blue suit. And it was polyester. With just like a plain white shirt underneath. So definitely something right out of like the 70s, even though it's a modern outfit. So they also had her podcast running, and it says, every week on her podcast, Fashion Neurosis, Bella Freud invites a guest to lie on the couch and explore connections between fashion and identity. I'm not pretending to do psychoanalysis at all, she says, but I needed an aesthetic. I needed a prop. So it's the couch and the chair. It's quite playful. So, all right. So the next part we will do on Thursday. So I hope that you enjoyed that one. I thought it was just really interesting, and I I'm on the fence. Like, I have so many books to read, and my focus, again, has got to be on quilts and textiles. But I feel like that Valerie Steele's book, that goes with this exhibit, might really be an interesting read. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. And so there was, you got to this modern suit by that belongs to Bella Freud, but everything in going forward now is going to be entirely modern fashion designers. Although I think some of these things were made probably, I want to say most of them were between like the 2000 teens and now. Um, there's at least one dress you're absolutely going to recognize without me even telling you what it is. So I will tease that. But there's a lot there. The clothes that we're going to look at in the second section are more, the crazy junk you see on the catwalk, the totally useless kind of outfits that like people don't really wear. All right, let's look real quick at what Drew had sent me. Let's see. Okay, so oops. So this is Pachuca Vintage. So there's a woman wearing the Issey Miyake. This is obviously not the red one. But you can see, it's the same thing. Oh, yeah. I think this is totally like, think about a cuff bracelet. This is like a cuff corset. You can see the back of this woman, and you can't even see the corset, but the front of her. So I'm guessing it just curves around just enough to kind of clip on your waist, right? Oh, and this one, Jodie Watley wearing it. What? Oh my goodness. Is she gonna take okay. So here she's taken and you can see that's like the skirt or whatever that you see. I probably violated some copyright there, but okay, so now we know. Like the Issey Miyake corset is like a cuff bracelet for your torso. All right, that was fun. So I hope you like that. I know sometimes I get a lot of inspiration, I guess, from non-quilt and textile things, and I mean, fashion is textile, right? Um, but I just feel like sometimes, you kind of have to step away from like purely quilts and sort of look at other stuff because it's, quilts and textiles, decorative or not, they weren't created in a vacuum. They were objects of their time. So, I think that there is kind of maybe it's loose, it's tenuous, but I think there is a connection between quilts and clothing, from a material culture standpoint. Okay. So let's get into some Mavis. So as a reminder, let me pull up my reading. Okay. So as a reminder, we are reading Traditional Quilting by Mavis Fitz Randolph. We are surprisingly at the last chapter. I didn't expect that we would get there so soon. Although I guess we technically have been reading it for quite a while. So Traditional Quilting by Mavis Fitz Randolph, written in 1954. And she's really focusing on, these are the quilts of England or the British Isles, but she focuses on southern Wales and northern England. Now, this one other wonderful thing I did this past weekend was I attended it's the Arizona Quilt Study Group. They do a quarterly online thing that anybody can go to. And I know some of our friends were there. Word and Bird Nerd was there. Padma was there. I think there was a couple other people there. I'm probably forgetting. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting you, but lots of people I knew were there. In any event, one of the lecturers was Heather Auden from the Quilters Guild of the British Isles. And she talked a lot about, all of the other quilting across all parts of England. So, and she talked quite a bit about Avril Colby. Now, Mavis Fitz Randolph, I think, was really just looking at she was interviewing people in these two localities. And I think that's why she sort of pigeonholed into, quilts from these specific areas. So, without further ado, let us get into it. Bear with me a minute. Okay. All right. So chapter 8. Oops. I'm going to make this bigger. My old eyes can see. Okay. Chapter 8. The future of traditional quilting. At first glance, the prospects of traditional quilting in England and Wales might seem bright. There are probably more people at the present day who have learned to quilt and are practicing the craft, though many of them may only do an occasional small piece of work, than there have been at any time since the earliest days of this century, 1954, so meaning 20th century. The two areas where the tradition still lives produced in the 10 years up to the outbreak of war in 1939 a quantity of quilted work, which for good sewing and fineness of design, certainly equaled and probably surpassed anything which had been done there in the preceding 100 years. The exhibition of traditional Welsh quilting held at St. Fagan's Folk Museum in 1951, and I want to say, did St. Fagan's came up in one of the other writers, didn't it? I'm searching my brain. I feel like maybe Avril Colby mentioned St. Fagan's, but it could have been Percival or MacGyver Percival. I don't know. It just sounds familiar. So, exhibition of traditional Welsh quilting held at St. Fagan's Folk Museum in 1951 showed that a considerable number of quilters are still producing work good in technique and fresh in design. Will these present-day quilters hand on to succeeding generations their traditional knowledge? In the past, the tradition has survived through the toughest conditions. When one considers to what extent quilting became, especially in Wales, a thrift craft practiced by the poor to make use of scraps of material, new and old, it is astonishing that the capacity to design elaborate patterns, demanding the finest work, was still latent in the quilters. With 2 layers of heavy material and a padding of rags to sew through, a quilter could only do the coarsest work. Even if she was lucky enough to have a length of sateen and some wool or wadding, or an old blanket to work on, the small payment she earned would hardly encourage her, one might think, to do anything but a simple, widely spaced pattern. Only the spirit of craftsmanship, the feeling that it was a lovely work, encouraged her to plan and sew the most beautiful patterns she could devise. Even the printed materials, with big, bold designs in strong colors, which masked so much of her work, did not dishearten her. Her love of fine workmanship and her sense of rightness in design survived all these handicaps. As soon as she was encouraged, by better payment and critical appreciation, to do better work, she did it with delight. The traditional quilters handed down from generation to generation not merely patterns as set pieces to be learnt by rote and reproduced unchanged. They handed down something infinitely more precious, the knowledge of how to create patterns. The method by which the new generation of quilters is taught is of great importance. If they do not learn to make their own patterns in the traditional way, always adding something of their own, the tradition will soon be dead. The technique of quilting is not very difficult. A good needlewoman can learn it quickly. But the ability to make a design which is good in itself and suitable to the work in hand is becoming rare in modern civilization. In the old days, the craftsman was his own designer. Nowadays, people tend to think of a designer as an expert who has learned to draw, someone apart from the craftsman. The teaching of quilting at home by a mother to her daughter is nearly extinct. The learner today is generally a member of a class. It may be a class organized by the local education authority in the quilting districts, or a short course arranged by the Women's Institute's organization, when a traditional quilter comes outside her own area to teach for a week or two. As a little sidetrack here, the Women's Institute is something that's really interesting that they have in England. And it's been around for a while. And it kind of, the way that Heather Auden described it is kind of like, it kind of sounds like home extension kind of services, like what we would have here in the U.S., but it still operates today. And I I think it kind of does, like, it's for the, for the support of women, basically. And, again, kind of like our sort of, rural industries type stuff that was, happening in the early 20th century, and, teaching women skills that may become lost, that kind of home extension type stuff. It sounds like what it is. So, but an interesting thing. And she said, it's just one of those things, like you mentioned, the Women's Institute, everybody knows what it is. And, it's alive and well in England. And so I guess it's kind of like what we would say here, like, we know, you mentioned Salvation Army, you mentioned the Red Cross, these different kind of organizations that you mentioned here in the States that we know very well. It's kind of what it sounds like. So, so this quilter coming from her own area and traveling somewhere else to teach. The girl who learnt at home from mother or granny, helping her at the frame, was taught as part of the craft the planning and marking of the design. It is not so easy for the quilter in charge of a large class to teach her pupils to design their own work, especially when some of them may be only too ready to take the easy way and let the teacher mark the whole pattern on the material for them. Some of them may be middle-aged women who never learnt to draw and think they cannot draw. A Durham woman who has taught many classes once told me that the middle-aged pupils are the most timid at designing. That's interesting, because it is kind of in our middle age, I think we've learned to sort of shut down a little bit and protect ourselves. And, when we talk about the whole idea of artwork, we talk about the freedom of children, how children don't have any, like, this pre-designated idea that some people are good artists and some are not. Some people have these skills and some don't. Really, a lot of art type of skills are really just kind of learned. Certainly some people have an eye for something. But just basic things like drawing, anybody can learn to draw. You just have to stick with it and learn how to do it. But I think it is people in their middle age tend to, they've been told all along, oh, you're not good at art. You're not an artist. You can't draw, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've lost that kind of childhood wonder. But then in old age, I think that, certainly there's still the people that are kind of carrying their middle-aged ideas. But I think there's something interesting that happens in older age, is that people start to not give a damn. And they're like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, which is one thing I'm thoroughly looking forward to in later life. Middle age now, I'm kind of in that weird place. But yeah, I think that's kind of sort of interesting what she's saying here. Okay. Perhaps the older ones remember the time when one did not, as a matter of course, buy a mass-produced pattern for any and every piece of work. The younger ones are easily persuaded that they can learn this as they have learned other handwork. But those in between are afraid that this unfamiliar adventure may be too difficult for them and that they may make fools of themselves. If the teacher is one of the older generation of quilters who learned at home in the traditional way, she knows that if her pupils do not learn to design, they will not have learned to quilt. Now, this is kind of interesting. Like, basically she's saying, in some people's opinion, you have not really learned to quilt if you haven't learned to do your own designs. How many of us today do our own designs? I mean, if you're long arming, you're literally like choosing a computer pattern to quilt for you, unless you're doing like really truly bespoke quilting, which is, I mean, it's done, but it's rarer because it's expensive. Otherwise, most people will find templates and things. I mean, we just don't even think about like, oh, you've got to design this quilting. People kind of use pre-built things. So it's interesting. The use of paper templates, each learner cutting her own, and the yarn needle or sharp-edged piece of tailor's chalk for marking, they will soon find that it is not so difficult as they had feared to mark the pattern outlines and then fill in the details. In this way, they will learn a great deal more than a technique. They will learn to coordinate hand and eye, to draw and to stitch firm, purposeful lines, and gradually to give expression to their own ideas. To look at a piece of work as a space to be filled, to think out how they would like to fill it, to adapt old shapes and to devise new ones, and to plan the pattern so that it is satisfactory because it is right. In the North, there are at least two enthusiasts passing on the tradition in this way. One in Northumberland told me recently that she has 2 classes in which all the learners design their own work, and 1 double bed and 3 single bed quilts are being made, as well as cot quilts and dressing jackets. The other in Weardale has many young girls and young women in her classes, and all learn to design. But the ideal method of teaching is not always followed. Through lack of time for the teacher to help every member of a large class effectively, and she mentions some LEA classes in South Wales are far too large. 30 is not an unusual number of members. So that's interesting. And this is in 1954, so early 50s. You've got people in Wales, up to 30 students trying to learn quilting. Doesn't sound like it's a dead craft at all. Through the pupil's own lack of expertise, sometimes through the teacher's own incompetence, learners may finish a course without having attempted even to mark their own patterns, much less to design them. They may only have achieved small pieces of work, such as cushion covers and dressing jackets, and thus have failed to learn how to set up a full-size quilt in the frame. Classes are sometimes held in schoolrooms full of desks where there is no space for big frames. Excuse me. There's no space for big frames, and not even the possibility of standing a number of small ones on suitably firm supports. So before I finish that, let's look at these 2 pictures from this chapter. This one I think is fascinating. Let me make it bigger. This is what she's talking about. Remember when we were, as I was reading, and she mentioned pennies? These are the pennies. So these like kind of coin-like, and they're just all lined up together. And I think we looked at a couple other quilts that kind of had it in the border, but this is definitely the pennies. And what she says about this is a small quilt by Miss Amaya Jones of Carmarthenshire. The pennies and crank patterns stand out against a background so closely quilted that it looks stippled. So I'm guessing that it's just that very, very tiny little stippling pattern that was quilted in. And then, so this thing she's calling a crank. To me, it kind of looks like sort of the orange peels, but with like a center line quilted in the middle of like the petals or the peel shapes. So I thought this was interesting that this is the pennies. And then this one that I've had up, this is a quilt by Mrs. Muriel Davies, Carmarthenshire. The original design shows the influence of Miss Amaya Jones, the maker of the quilt above, her teacher. It is comparable in style to the English century work that we've already looked at. 18th century, well, not English, 18th century work. But I mean, look at this. I mean, this is amazing. I can only guess, because we don't have a detail, but I can only guess, like this is sort of a, the grid work, the diamonds, and then these around these sort of almond shapes or orange peel shapes is just this it looks like very dense quilting to make them pop out. They could be stuffed. I'm assuming they're not, because she doesn't mention it. And then these circular designs around the edges, and I kind of wonder if they're a spiral, because you kind of see this like little bit of center here, and I'm wondering if that it pops up a little bit. What an amazing thing. That quilting is just astounding. I wish we could see it in color and a better picture of it. But the woman who made this taught the woman who made this. Amazing, right? Okay. A Welsh woman, when asked about some original features in the design of a handsome and well-sewn quilt, which she was showing, replied that it was marked by my teacher in chalk and I don't know any other patterns. A good Northumberland quilter told me that her classes only work on cushion covers and similar small things and don't want to mark their own patterns, so she does it all for them. These instances show that the mere fact that every year dozens of classes in so called traditional quilting are held does not mean that the tradition is being carried on. The very popularity of the craft may be its misfortune because it attracts people who regard it merely as a kind of fancy work, who have no interest in tradition, who are content to quilt one or two small pieces of work under guidance, and will then turn their attention perhaps to barbola or lampshades. Okay, I don't know what barbola is. It's Barbola, some kind of craft, I guess, or lampshades. I'm assuming in the 50s she'd be talking about those floofy lampshades that, those little boudoir lampshades, perhaps. Okay. Many of the quilters in County Durham who were doing such good work between 1920 and 1930 were elderly women. Some are now dead, and others have put away their frames for good because of age and infirmity. It is disheartening to hear that few of their daughters are quilting. Again and again, the story is that none of my daughters would learn, or one of my daughters learned, but she never does it now. So now think about this. This is 1954. These elderly women, their daughters, presumptively would have been coming up, either, born or coming up within the years of the war. So either, if we're talking like very elderly women, their children might have been coming up during World War One, or they could have, daughters who were, older, but, of this younger woman's class during World War Two. So, I realize what she's saying. It's disheartening to hear that the daughters are not quilting. But also you think about these women had a very different experience of what their young woman's life was like in the 20th century than their mothers did in the 19th century. So to me, it's like, it's no surprise they weren't quilting. To me, it's surprising that this many women were quilting, even though they're primarily, older women. Because, really, the reason why quilting kind of stayed going, I think, here in the 20th century here in the U.S. was probably because, it had this early 20th century, it had this, rise in popularity because of this idea of like colonial, this colonial revival, romanticism of the colonial era. But by the 1930s, it was really just about kind of mend and make do. And that happened in the UK as well. They were touched more closely by the two world wars. And so it really, she's not acknowledging that. And maybe in 1954, she's too close to it, but it kind of surprises me that she's not acknowledging the reason why these women don't learn to quilt is because of war, Ooh. So Druid has some details for us. Barbola. Oh, okay. I know what this is. So barbola refers to decorative arts using a molded plastic-like paste, originally a plaster mixture, to create raised floral designs, often found on antique and vintage items like mirrors, baskets, and picture frames. It involves applying and shaping the paste to form three-dimensional flowers, leaves, and other motifs, which are then painted and finished. The term also refers to the decorative trim itself, which is sometimes called a gesso trim when made from a different paste. So gesso can be made into a paste, and it's just basically like it's pigment and binders like plaster and stuff. So I think I've seen maybe a more modern way of this, in which it's like a template or like a stencil you put down, and then you put modeling paste over it, and you pull the stencil off, and you have this raised design. That's what I know of, like, here in the the 21st century, but it sounds like it's the same thing. Very interesting. Okay. So in South Wales, a number of younger women who learned the craft thoroughly in the classes organized by the Rural Industries Bureau are still doing excellent work. But under modern conditions, it is not likely that many of them will teach their daughters to quilt. In fact, the tradition handed down until now in the family must depend for its future life upon the method of class teaching. And so 50s and 60s here in the US, same thing. They were classes, if at all, anything. Classes are not confined to the districts in which traditional quilting still flourishes. Teachers from County Durham and Northumberland, and less often from South Wales, may go far afield for visits of a week or so, and then the course is finished. And when the course is finished, the learners may be left in the air. If they can only set up a small piece of work and quilt it along the lines of a pattern already marked for them, how are they to start on something new? They will certainly never be able to pass on anything of value to others. A class of this kind might well be a starting point for the inquiry about surviving traces of a local tradition and quilts made a few generations ago. But the teacher, proud of her own county's prowess in the craft and unwilling to admit that any other county can equal it, ignores this opportunity. For instance, classes in Durham quilting have been held for Women's Institute members in Westmoreland without any reference to local work, although there are known to be many old quilts in the county and in the office of the County Federation of WI, the Women's Institute. There is even a collection of Westmoreland templates. If these and some old quilts have been brought out for discussion and comparison, the members of the class might have been set on the way to studying their own local tradition, devising new templates, and developing their own local style, instead of merely copying that of a neighboring county. Well, they just didn't have people studying, right? They didn't have people doing quilt study. Quilting may long continue to be practiced and taught as a craft. The well-known pattern units, many of them already recorded in various publications, may still be used, but this will not necessarily mean that the vital creative spark will survive. Oh, Mavis, you are such a... It's funny. I mean, how would she feel today? What would her mindset be today? Looking at multiple quilting revivals since she wrote this book, and how we learn to quilt today. Still sometimes from mothers, sometimes from family members, sometimes from YouTube, sometimes from many, many, teachers. Yeah. And we still don't know how to mark our quilts, I guess. There is real danger that the tradition may go the way of so many other traditions, not to be entirely lost, but to cease to live and grow. This is why I have attempted to collect the traditional knowledge and put it on record. It is a dangerous thing to do, involving the risk of stereotyping it, so that it becomes a set of rigid formulae. Therefore, I have tried not to dogmatize about what is the right way, but to note as many as possible of the different ways of marking patterns and working them, and to set down as much as possible in the words of those who know. I have not neglected any evidence I could find, even when it shattered a previously formed theory, and I hope that this record may encourage others to search out old quilts and further information with an inquiring mind. I believe that traditional quilting must have survived, especially in remote villages and farmhouses, well into the 19th century in districts where it has not yet been searched for. It has. And the old people could still talk of it, and old quilts still be found. Perhaps some of those quilted skirts worn by fisherwomen on the northeast coast are still packed away in mothballs in their descendants' cottages. Perhaps the forerunners of the modern Durham feather patterns are lying safe but forgotten in attics, maybe in Yorkshire. Is there any real value in traditional knowledge which makes it worth some effort to keep it alive? Quilts may be preserved in our homes and our museums, patterns may be recorded in photographs, and the technique may be exactly described in the written word and by illustrations. What more is there? There is the skill to go on creating new patterns. The records are something from the past. They have an antiquarian and perhaps an artistic interest, but the tradition has an educational and psychological value. If the new generation of quilters are taught in the traditional way, they will have learned much more than to make pretty things for their homes, and even perhaps to earn a few pounds by making them for others. They will have learnt to coordinate hand and eye, to see the pattern in their minds, to draw the outlines, and to sew even the unmarked lines accurately and rhythmically. They will have acquired a sense of design which can make their bare stretch of material flower into patterns. They will be able to see ideas for patterns in the everyday things around them, a flower, a leaf, wicker work, ironwork, or woodwork, and will find much entertainment in devising a new template. And all this adds up to the satisfaction derived from creative work, from expressing one's own ideas and making something peculiarly one's own. A Durham woman told me how she was very low in her mind after her husband's sudden death, followed by other misfortunes. She could take no interest in life until she decided to get out her quilting frame. This blows my mind that this is in here. I mean, think about this. Think about Dr. Dunton and his ideas about how all of the aspects of quilting could be good for the nervous mind. And my project that I did as an Artist James Scholar in 2024, where I mined the Quilt Alliance's oral history project for quilters talking about this very subject, that they were sad, they were, depressed, they couldn't get through it when, bad things had happened, such as deaths in the family or being a caretaker for somebody who was very ill. And they turned to quilting. So this blows my mind that this is here. So I love this. So she got out her quilting frame. In spite of her unhappiness, she was soon absorbed in the old fascination of studying what to put on and then seeing the patterns form under her hand. The quilting saved my mind, she said. This stimulating effect of an occupation, which can completely absorb the powers of the mind for the time being, is not peculiar to quilting. Any artist or true craftsman knows it, but when so much handicraft is done with all the materials ready made, ready drawn, ready cut, in fact, so ready that the mind is hardly occupied by the process at all, any work which demands creative effort from the worker is worthy of preservation. The quilting tradition is a skill from the living past which remains alive, enabling the quilter of today to create new beauty. It is in her hands and in the hands of all who teach quilting to see that it is passed on alive to the future. And that is the end of chapter 8 and essentially the end of the book. However, there are some good things in the appendix. I'm not going to read, so she has an appendix, references to quilting from the 15th to the 18th century. I'm not going to read this, but it's really interesting. She, gets into all kinds of references in, various just written references. She's got inventories from wills and all kinds of things. Appendix 2 is called Old Joe, the Northumberland Quilter, circa 1745 to 1825. So we will read this one on Thursday. And it is an article that appeared in a newspaper in 1947. So, it's questionable, how much of it's true. And then Appendix 3, she literally has a breakdown by dates of, the earnings, by dates and by locality. So it's kind of interesting stuff. So that will be the end. We will finish up. Yeah, great timing, maybe it's right. I did not expect it to end that way. So that just kind of blows my mind that she's quoting this old lady. I mean, my gosh, I have dozens of quotes about people saying the very same thing. So I go back to the fact, can quilting and needlework save the world, change our lives, make us better people, make us creative, and make our minds well? Yes to all of the above. So the story about Old Joe the Quilter is a sad one. But it happened a long time ago. So we will, it's quilting and true crime. So we have to look at it that way. So we'll hit that on Thursday. We'll look at the second part of the FIT exhibit on Thursday. And like I said, it's it's the weird stuff, the more modern, early 21st century stuff. So, but hopefully you've enjoyed it, and it's just a change, and will be something that you'll be excited to see. Also on Thursday. Tomorrow, Jill and I, we're moving into the second part. Actually, you know what? I just realized I gotta move me back. Jill and I are doing chapters 2 and 3 of A Stitch in Time by Amy Newell. We'll do that tomorrow on Quilt Nerding on YouTube. So hopefully you're following along with us, and look forward to seeing you. Have a wonderful week, as Druid says. A great week, every nerd. I'm so glad to see you guys today, and look forward to seeing you later this week. So take care. Mwah! Bye.